All right.
All right, everybody. Take two. Here we go. Take two. Let's do this again. Sorry for the technical problems, but we are going to be sure that it was worth the wait for you guys. And I'd like to reintroduce Allison Foley. And she's the former Boston College head women's soccer coach, the winningest coach in Boston College history, youth national team scout, celebrated author of 2 books. Sam, let's do it. Right here, How to Coach Girls and the Elusive Full Ride Scholarship. She's currently helping high school athletes with the recruiting process, FoleyAthleticAdvising.com. And this is the Ilovetowatchyouplay.com podcast with Dr. Sam Minyar. He's our resident sports psychologist. Thank you, Sam. And our mission here is to help you be the best sports parent or coach you can be. And we do this by talking to top experts like Allison and newsmakers in youth sports and drilling down on the topics that are most important to the health, happiness, and success of your athlete. Again, Allison, we're so excited to have you.
Thank you, Asia. Thank you, Sam. It's great to be here.
And thank you to anyone who stood by and waited. We had a little technical difficulties, but we're going to get started again. And Allison, you had mentioned, or we had brought up the idea that you actually have a degree in the sports psychology of girls. And I wanted to know a little bit more about that.
Right. And it's sort of, as I was mentioning, a combination of my degrees with a specialization. So undergrad, I was a psychology major. And then I started right after graduation, a master's degree, which was in counseling. And then I really got into the sports psychology, and it was a better track for me to go into kinesiology. So really was my 2 passions were able to come together. And then I did some of my coursework specifically in girls and sports psychology. And here I am, still passionate about the subject.
Well, 20 years, you were the head coach at Boston College. There's been a lot of changes in women's soccer and in women's sports throughout that time. Can you talk about sort of the differences of where it was when you started to now?
Yeah, fortunately, Asia, I think the changes have been in the right direction, have really been positive. There's been certainly an increase in funding and equality in opportunity, whether it's travel to the men's program, whether it's basketball, women's ice hockey, men's ice hockey comparison, soccer, men's soccer. Budgets are a lot more comparable, opportunity and travel, and certainly our ability to go out and recruit. There's a lot more tournaments for females out there these days. So it's certainly trending in the right direction.
What about any negatives? Have you seen, and we talk a lot about on I Love to Watch You Play, kids getting overworked and over specialization. And I know you're no longer there, but you're still very involved because your main focus now is helping players get to that next level. Has there been a change a negative change per se in seeing younger women their bodies breaking down and then burning out earlier?
I do see that, and that is probably the biggest negative. And you and I are multi-sport athletes, and most women in our generation were, and boys for that matter. And I do think there's a bigger concentration on specializing at a younger age. There's this idea that more training in one specific sport will increase excellence. And actually, when you look at the studies, that's not true. It's good to be a multi-sport athlete for a lot of reasons. The obvious, as you mentioned, overuse, which is a direct correlation to increased injury, boredom. And boredom is one of the reasons why we see kids dropping out. It's fun to look forward to the next sport in the next season. And it's fun to look forward to your next friend group and a different set of coaches. It keeps things fresh. It keeps things exciting. And, that certainly, there's this idea that if I get, a year-round soccer program, and if I get a specialist in individual training and technical training, and if I get, a strength and conditioning coach that specializes in my child's sport, they're going to be at the top of their game. And to this date, there hasn't been a scientific proof of that. So maybe it's old school thinking, but certainly I do think, the more exposure to different sports and to different coaches and different friend groups is positive.
So Allison, we were going to talk about this later, but since you brought it up, I kind of wanted to ask you now. The research is, as you said, very clear on the value of being a multi-sport athlete, whether you're talking about emotional health and psychological health, whether you're talking about athletic ability, length of time in a sport, athletic success later in life. We could go on and on and on, right? And so I think all of our listeners have probably understand the value of being a multi-sport athlete. But as a parent, and I have two, a boy and a girl who play soccer, it is very difficult to get the coaches on board with having a multi-sport athlete. And so what advice do you have for our parents or for the coaches that might be listening in terms of how do you make that happen? I mean, is it possible to really be a multi-sport athlete and still get a opportunity to play in college?
I think that there is. And I think there's some pressure. There's that sideline parental pressure. You know, they hear that, well, my son or daughter is going to this particular specialist coach. And you feel, and I'm a parent of a high school athlete too, and I've heard it on the sidelines too. You feel almost as a parent that you're missing out. And as a coach, you feel that, you know, I need more dedication from my athlete. I need them to prove that this means something important to them and they want to be the best they possibly can. And I think we have to take a step away from that. And I think as a parent and a coach, we have to really buy into what you and I just said, Sam. There's no scientific proof that this increases their opportunities at the next level, that this develops them faster. And, you know, the body is going to go at its own pace. The body can't be pushed physically to jump or go faster in their 40 until their body develops and in those muscle groups develop. And, you know, I think that if coaches and parents do take a look a little bit deeper and see that there isn't any proof out there, that maybe they'll make a better decision for their children.
Allison, is there though a time period, like my daughter who's a sophomore and, you know, plays at a high level of soccer, is there a time period she's trying to decide if she's going to play volleyball this year or not, and she has been in the past, where you do recommend that maybe they need to focus just on the sport they're trying to play at the next level?
Yeah, you know, I again, I believe in the theory there can be a primary sport and a complement sport. And the complement sport, the secondary sport, does just that. It complements in a positive direction. It's working on different muscle groups. It's not overusing the same muscles in your primary sport. And it's getting your mind in a really clear space that when I go back to my primary sport, I'm 100%. My adrenaline's there, my interest's there, my ability to be coached again, and my thirst for the sport is there. So I do think it's okay when you are playing your secondary sport, and as that season changes, that you do go, you know, if basketball is your primary sport, you do go, you know, play some hoops with your friends and you stay in touch with the sport. It just doesn't have to be intense all year round.
So Sam, wait, I just want to follow up. I'm sorry.
Go for it. No.
On this one point, because I think it's important. A lot of parents are curious. Would you recommend then that they, like you're saying, pickup games, but they stop playing? Because we might be going through this now. Like they don't play their number one sport during they don't try to do both at the same time to a limited degree. They stop, do the other sport, and come back.
I think it's difficult to be in season in two sports. I think it's super hard to be in season in your club sport and in season in your high school sport.
But club sport never stops. That's the problem, right?
Well, you know, but that's one of the things, you know, a lot of governing bodies have taken a look at. And, you know, and they are trying to give, you know, 2 months off in the summer, you know, a month off in whatever that out of season might be. So they are trying to put in highest level club sport breaks, and for just this reason, because they, you know, some administrators are getting the right message that we do as organizations need to build in an off season. And if we look at the professionals in every sport, there's an off season. There's a time to recover.
It's interesting.
There's a time to detach emotionally. There's a time
Mm-hmm.
to rest physically. And hey, how many basketball players do you see out on the golf course, right? On their
Right.
time. It's
Right.
a break for a reason. And as intense as professional sports are, they give more of an off season and a break than we do our high school players.
So to stick with this for a second here, and this is I just want to ask some of the hard questions here, and this is nothing towards you, Allison. This is more the industry that we're talking about here. But since Asia and I both have children who play soccer, and since you're a soccer expert, let's talk about soccer for a moment.
Sure.
So at least where I live, the fall is when the high school season occurs, and then club picks up as soon as the high school season ends, goes through winter, goes through spring. And yes, I understand for example, the girls academy has instituted a 2-month mandatory break in the summer. But if you have a child who wants to play a second sport, who is a soccer player, if they play for their high school, and I won't get into whether they should or shouldn't play for their high school or not. But so they play for their high school, and then they play for their club team the minute high school season ends. How could you possibly play another sport?
Well, and again, I said I don't think it's ideal to be in season in 2 sports, but I think you do have to look at the intensity of a sport. So, for instance, given back to the sport that Asia was referring to, could you play volleyball after school and then make it to 2 club practices a week? That probably is a good balance, because it does give you a break, and it gives you a time to focus in a different friend group. It's different coaches, it's different muscle groups. But if it's balanced once or twice, with practice, you could probably get away with doing it. I think the bigger danger, Sam, than trying that balancing act is the elimination act, getting away from that complement sport, because usually the complement sport isn't as intense, right? And I know Asia's primary sport was basketball. My complement sport was basketball. It was just fun, and I did ODP. I traveled a couple of weeks, in the winter for practices and whatnot for soccer, but I loved running around, and sometimes I didn't even know what direction I was going on the basketball court. I was quick, so I could steal, but that was about it. I missed every layup, every shot. But it was, and it's nice not to have to feel like you have to be the best on your compliments. Right. And it's humbling, and it teaches you so many other, really important qualities on how to be a role player, on how to be, maybe coming off the bench, and all these really good lessons that down the line your complement sport, can help you.
So would it really be I think everything always goes back to communication, right? Like if it's your complement sport, even if you're really good at it, but you are communicating with that coach ahead of the season that this is my plan. I'm still going to be going to my soccer practices. I'd love to do this, and really talking to both coaches. And look, not every coach is going to be okay with that, right? And then there might be a tough decision to be had. But if you really communicate, then it should be doable, right? As long as and it's that communication point. I think too often parents or the kids are afraid to kind of even let either coach know what their plan is, because they don't want to be docked on either side. And if a coach should have the best interest of the athlete, of the person at hand. And so it'd be hard for them to sit and have a discussion where you're saying, I need this break to play another sport. I really want the time. Can you work with me on it? I mean, I think only a select few could really deny or try to say, if you don't make my practices, or if you're ever late, you're not going to play. I mean, I really do think coaches in general want the best and should want the best for these athletes.
I agree. And I think, you started off the question with a really good word, communication.
Yeah.
And doing it early enough so the game plan is set. We
Mhm.
know what it looks like on both sides, on the coach's side and the student athlete side. And we've created the plan that works for both sides. I do think, and Sam alluded to it, that the former Development Academy, now Girls Academy, they had to catch on, right? They were losing players to the ECNL that had an off season.
Right.
And I think in the last 2 years, AAU basketball has figured it out. I think a lot of these other organizations of sports are starting to figure out we can't have our athlete year round because there's options. Whether it might be at a less competitive level of their own sport, which might be school, or if it's a
Mhm.
totally different sport. Again, I like to use that word, the complement sport, because I think the secondary sport is great, and has so many benefits. So I do think there is a very recent trend to understanding the value of variety in sport.
Mhm.
Well, that's great. That's great to hear. As you said a few minutes ago, most of the changes have been positive, right? So
Correct.
it's great to hear that that's continuing. I want to talk a little bit about this, your book, How to Coach Girls. And, you know, in particular, what pushed you, what propelled you to write this book? What did you see as the problem that's out there in terms of coaching girls versus a one size fits all approach?
Yeah. So Sam, my co-author, Mia Wengen, who was fantastic throughout the book, um, and prior to, leading up to it, she had said for 2 years probably prior to, you got to write a book. You have all this information. She would come down. She lived right down the road, street from me, and she'd come down. Zoe has this issue with clicks on their team. We don't think that our other daughter is going to make the top team. What do we do? What do we say? There's parents on the sideline saying the wrong thing. So, I just, from my experience, offer, what I could. And eventually she said, listen, we got to do this. We got to put this in a book. You have so much knowledge to help coaches and parents. And my reaction was, I'm not going to write a book.
Right.
Yeah, in your spare time.
Well, I just didn't think that I should, all right, but she talked me into it. It was a wonderful project. And I think, Sam, to ask you specifically the turning point, when she had said, Allison, 70% of middle school kids are quitting before they play high school, and girls at 6%, six times the rate as boys. I said, well, we've got a problem here. And if there is just something small that I can offer, advice or whatever it could be, to stop that progression, it's time to write a book.
And we're glad you did. And so if you're just joining, we have Allison Foley here with us today, who's the former head women's soccer coach at Boston College. And she has written 2 books, How to Coach Girls, as well as the other one, which we'll get to in a little bit, is the Elusive Full Ride Scholarship. So if you have questions, please put them in the chat.
Yeah, we'd love to hear from you guys out there. Anything you got, just put it up and we'll get it to Allison and get some answers for you. So Allison, what is the number one difference between coaching girls and boys? Or what is the main, when you start a talk or when you're started to write the book, what's the first thing that came to your mind about the differences?
Yeah, really nothing on the field. I think between the lines, you run similar drills, you run similar exercises. Tactically, you communicate the same. On the chalkboard at halftime, pregame, it looks very similar. It is similar. I think the biggest difference is the emotional side to it, and in communication. And they're both have their assets in terms of their strengths in their communication and how they want to be communicated to. And I think there's a couple of examples that I put in the book. You can say to on picture day, team picture day for the boys, hey, all the big guys go in the back. All of them think they're the big guy. They're all lining up. If you say, hey, all the big girls line up in the back, you see all these heads go down. And nobody wants to be the big girl in the back.
No.
And
I've been that. No.
it's a choice of words, and it's a lot of it is the media hype. What do we see? What do we see? Often modeling on the guy side, it's these big, muscular 6'4", ripped guys, and then and then they see it, and we see a lot of media that's really honoring smaller bodies that are maybe thinner, and girls see that and guys see that. So we're a product of our social imaging for sure. So we need to be aware of that as we coach, and even sometimes tone. Tone means a lot more than messaging. Specifically, I think with females. And how many times have you seen a coach on the side? You got to slow down. You got to slow down. Take a look. Take a look. Like that panic. Like, how am I going to slow down when you're screaming at me with such panic in your voice? And we forget that processing. It comes in. And then as I translate and try to execute, that plays over, friends, right? So just being aware of that second part of that goes with boys and girls.
But girls, as you've said, may internalize that different, right? Like, yes, yelling is not good for either one. Really, it like causes them to use the wrong part of their brain and not really think. But the difference might be, as you mentioned a lot in your book, is how that is internalized to a female with the yelling and taking it personal. And they want to play so much for their coach, right? That it takes it to maybe an extra level that the boys aren't taking it to.
Yeah. And there's some girls that can motivate, that like they can get pushed that way. The studies show that the majority do not. And guys, sometimes they'll play to spite their coaches. Girls play to impress their coaches.
So interesting. Yep.
And that's just something that we have to understand. Again, the training can be the same. The tactical execution and game plans can all be the same. Our delivery needs to be slightly different. Girls are a bit more of social beings. They all want to be well-liked. Sometimes it's really hard, especially at that middle school age when there's a girl that's starting to perform a little bit higher. She might bring herself down to be one of the pack because she doesn't want to be the superstar or the guy. In general, these again are generalizations, of course.
Right.
A boy superstar at middle school, he'll take that ball if he can get another hat trick the next day, and then score 20 points. Be the leading scorer in the court. Be the quarterback every single game. Fantastic. And that's just differences that we have to be aware of. It's not a rule that's 100%, but majority of girls.
Yeah, but playing those odds, and how many coaches do you think really are? I mean, you're at the highest level, right? But we're talking about trying to keep girls in sports. That those coaches need to be knowledgeable about those kinds of things at a very young age. How do we get this message to them? How do we sort of educate coaches? A lot of them are parents, and sometimes, but at the club level even, are they seeking this information? Is there training for them? Is it, how are we getting it to them?
I do think that we are starting to see a trend in educating coaches a little bit more, not just field training or court training or ice training. There's a lot more emphasis that I've seen in different clubs on the psychological component. As we look at sport, there's the physical, there's the technical, there's the tactical, and then there's the psychological in all sport, right? In that quarter, the psychology has really been overlooked, I think, for decades. And now I think, again, another positive trend in the last few years that we're understanding the power of that component. And listen, if it's not up here, forget about, the body and everything else. If our mind isn't in the right place and prepared and psychologically just feeling really confident. So I do, I think social media has really helped us in that capacity. Understanding, you hear more professional athletes talk about their woes and their issues.
Such a good point. Yeah.
Unconfident and having maybe a difficult coach, in high school, and maybe thinking that they might quit the sport, right? Michael Jordan's one of the best examples, right?
Right.
And but I think the more we hear that professional athletes talk about it, on how that affected them, coaches will start saying like, wow, that's an important message. I have to really make sure I'm studying the psychology of the athlete a little bit better.
Allison, can you see we do have a question? James Conway, he says, how much of the 70%, and he's referring to the quitting, comes down to the rising costs of travel ball, AAU, burnout, simply lose interest? Some families just can't afford the expenses.
Yeah, that's a great point that James brings up. This particular study was done with athletes, and the questions were more on their interests and not financial. And it wasn't. It was done with high school middle school specifically in schools, not in clubs. So finance really wouldn't have been a part of this particular study because it would have, for the most part, after school activities are free. So the questions really were driven from other interests, their parents not deciding what they were doing anymore. So they have a little bit more freedom to decide what they were doing after school. Where their social groups were going. Their social groups maybe started finding, parties or another interest or another hobby. And so in this particular pool, that was drawn was not from an extensive club system.
And even if it were, the other statistic you threw out was that the girls are quitting at 6 times the rate. So,
Correct.
So I would hope that in 2021 we're willing to spend the same on our daughters and our sons. So even if and look, the costs are going up and they are getting out of hand. But okay, so. I loved hearing you talk about the mental or the psychological pillar. As a sports psychologist, that's music to my ears. And thank you for the plug for sports psychology and psychological side. So I wanted to ask a question related to that. I coach as well as being a sports psychologist, and not to the level you do. I only have my D license to coach soccer, but I if I'm being honest, I prefer coaching girls than boys for a lot of reasons.
You hear that a lot. Yeah.
It's just more fun, and you can be silly, and you could just be loose and so forth. And I just feel like they appreciate their coach so much more because of some of those dynamics that you talked about. But I tend to end up coaching boys because I'm hesitant that I feel like from a sociological standpoint, girls need to have female role models as their coaches. And so sometimes I'm hesitant. So I'm just curious as to what your thoughts are. Again, if all things are equal, right? If they have the same pedigree or the same track record or experience, is it more beneficial for a girl to have a female coach?
Yeah, Sam, in an ideal world, there's a head coach and an assistant coach, and one's male and one female. Because I think both have different types of nurturing skills and different type of coaching strengths. I don't want to say one is better than the other because I just don't think that's fair. I just think that I'd like to encourage more females to get into the coaching profession.
Sure.
And a couple of examples that I'll give. I had one of my players was from BC, was a 3-time All-American, went on to play college soccer on the national team, very talented player. And she said, my daughter's now playing soccer, and Dougie's coaching her. Well, I go, well, Doug played ice hockey in college. She's like, well, I'm managing. I go, well, why is that?
Right.
Well, I'm not gonna coach. Again, why is that?
Why?
And women don't feel that they can coach, and they can, and this is somebody that's played at the highest level, and and I think we're still kind of gender role in that. Well, I'll be the manager, and the guy will coach. My husband can do that, or another dad can do that. So there's coaching apps out there now for females, and to basically encourage them and instruct them daily on how to make training sessions and how to feel more confident. And coach me up. She can coach me up, I think, is one of them. And I just think that I don't think it's better. I just think that it would be nice to have more women involved. And I think in a college staff, I always say, it's really nice to have a female out of 4 coaches on staff. There are issues that maybe a female can understand a little bit better. And in the same token, I think women can coach men, but there might be something that a male coach can. One of my favorite clients that I work with is a male client. I love working with him. I love training him. I love hearing about, watching him playing his games. But I'm sure that there's things that, a male coach can bring out of him that I couldn't. So, I just think that it'd be nice to see more women feel confident that they can get out there and coach.
And that's the beauty of what you're talking about in your book. So some of that confidence that we're talking about with young girls can continue on into adulthood, whether they're being a coach or whether they're an executive. The research with executives is quite clear in that women will only, again, we're talking in generalizations. And so I also have to give that caveat. We're continuum here, and certainly one size does not fit all. But generally speaking, women will not raise their hand for a promotion until they feel like they've had everything checked off the box. Whereas men are willing to throw their hat in the ring, whether they may only meet 50% of the qualifications. And so if we can do something to change young girls' confidence through sport, the impact could be lifelong.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're right, Sam. There's been a lot of studies about women and executives and CEOs and how many of them played competitive athletics. Maybe not necessarily in college, but certainly in club programs or in high school. And they're learning these great skills. They're learning how to, if they get knocked down, how to stand back up, how to speak for themselves, how to lead in groups, how to persevere, how to put hard work into projects as well. And I think those are some of the great qualities that females certainly can gain through playing high school athletics.
And, in the book, Allison, I just want to point out too to everybody, I loved you had some real practical help for someone who's coaching girls. And so for moms out there, there's certain things, even just dividing cliques, and you had a clever way of, if you're in a carpool or not in a carpool, this group goes together. By books, if you read a book for pleasure today, just some really by age, line from oldest to youngest, and by pets, if you have a cat, a dog, and a lot of the stuff that you're talking about. And it was also ways to make it fun. And I think, over the years, you hear that's what everyone says, right? It has to be fun. It has to be fun. And I think a lot of times that kind of goes in one ear and right out the other ear. But it truly does have to be fun. That's the thing, right? And especially for girls, and as we're saying, and we keep, saying there are outliers and there are some girls, and, it doesn't mean they don't want to go hard or they don't, but having that time for the chat at the beginning, as you've mentioned, or some of these fun, on page 19 in your book, you talk about a lot of different ways to keep it fun. And, it's critical and I think you even say in the last few minutes, to make sure there's something fun at the end, what their takeaway when they go home and how they're feeling about it is not that you just had to do a one-on-one against everybody. And, most of those people half of them are going to be losers. You want to do something where they walk away and want to come back again.
Exactly. And I'll give you an example. I was working with my 13-year-old niece, who's a soccer player, yesterday on the field, and picked her up. We, trained for a little bit, and then I'm driving her home. And right now it's club soccer time. People are starting to think potentially about changing teams and stuff like that. And we talked about maybe, trying out for another team that, what I understand is a higher level. But I said, so she's somebody that's pretty competitive for her age group. And I said, well, McKenna, what is why do you think you might want to do this? And she said, her friend's name that's on that team, they went out 2 weeks ago and played laser tag. They do the most.
Exactly.
And I thought, maybe they won more.
Right.
It was laser tag a couple of weeks ago. My team doesn't do that. So,
Yeah.
and this is someone that's going to be going to high school, but that, it's that middle school age, and as competitive as she, thinks she is, that was the first thing that came out of her mouth. And
but it's not just the middle school age. I don't know if you guys follow the national women's team, right? But they're constantly posting videos where they are doing fun drills and laughing and going at it. I mean, even at that level, you got to keep it fun.
I think if you ask kids at BC, was it more important to you to be in the top 20, or do you look more forward to the Easter egg hunt in the off season? Easter eggs for the full athletic department. That was like the best day for them, the Easter egg hunt. They couldn't wait. They couldn't wait for that. And they're social beings, and they want to have fun.
Yep. All right. Shall we move on to your other book, co-written with Mia Wengen, and it's called The Elusive Full Ride Scholarship. How realistic is it that a high school soccer player can play in college, Allison?
The stats show, very few high school players turn into college players. And that's a little bit disappointing when you see some of the numbers. However, I think those numbers are taken from studies of a lot of the Division I schools. And I think what we have to look at is there are Division I, Division II, Division III, NAIA. And in those different schools, there's different layers of programs. We always talk about the varsity, right? The true, teams that we all see. There's incredible club programs at these colleges. And, where my office was at BC, I could look over the football stadium and the club soccer team would practice underneath there. And I would be so distracted because I'd look at them. I'm like, they're so good. I recruited one of my best goalies.
I love that.
And, they have coaches. They're talented. They travel to other colleges. And again, my biggest, I think, want or desire for boys and girls, if you love the sport, when you go to college, find the venue to continue. And it might be on the club team, it might be on the intramural team, but you're going to compete. You're going to play the sport that you love. You're going to find friends. You're going to have coaches as mentors again, and you're going to have this community and this built-in family, sort of what you did, through high school, middle school, and for a lot of kids, their whole lives.
For sure, that's great advice. And we've talked about your books today, and I want to plug them again because they are, I would call them handbooks. You do a great job of. It's not science. I mean, it's obviously founded in science, but it's not theoretical. It's very much how to. And Asia brought some of them up. The first 10 minutes of a practice, the end of a practice, and now that we're moving on to the scholarship. So big money business is helping student athletes in high school get into a college program of any level. And I agree with you. We need to widen our view of what we were talking about here. So D1 through 3, NAIA, club sports, etc. There are recruiting services, there's video services, there's, all sorts of technology that's out there. Are any of them worth it? And if so, I certainly don't need to plug, any thing in particular, but help our parents understand what should they do and what shouldn't they do.
Well, Foley Athletic Advising is worth it.
We can plug that one. But I was specifically meaning other services.
Yeah, the book does talk about and break down those different parts of how to get exposure, and the idea of recruiting is increasing your exposure to the coaches, right? And certainly, we talk about hooks, and I think a really good highlight tape is a really good hook. I can certainly say that as a college coach, I'd watch a highlight tape and I'd say there's something about her. And what it would really do, and then maybe I'd, request a game tape and say, okay, tactically, I can see a little bit more than just, the goal or the incredible header or the, blazing 10-second run. I'd then be curious to watch, half of a game tape. But still, the live evaluation would still almost always have to happen. I'd say, especially in Division One. So the videos are an incredible resource on how to hook the coach and pique their interest to want to know more about you and see you play more. Um, knowing what to include in your resume, what are the things that college coaches are really looking for? Knowing where to be and when to be at places. There's so many ID and showcases right now,
Yep.
and some are more credible than others. And you might have to research a little bit more. You might have to ask around. You might have to ask others that have attended these showcases in the past. What were the coaches' participation? Were they really there? And I think at the end of the day, when you talk about these different avenues of getting exposure, going to colleges and going to their particular ID clinics, there's always value in just about everything. You certainly do have to do some homework to find out which opportunities give you the best value.
Okay, so there's a lot of things, and it's really doing your homework to figure out which showcase to go to, which ID camp to go to. But those are two things you mentioned that are certainly helpful,
Yep.
because the live evaluation is really what it's all about. What if you? Oh, I'm sorry. What if you are that diamond in the rough, so to speak, or you don't play for a big club, but you believe you have the talent, or so your club isn't going to a showcase, other than going to an ID clinic for a college that you're interested in. What are some other opportunities to kind of get noticed?
Yeah, I think a part of it is it's very helpful if you have the right resources and references supporting you. So it may be somebody that maybe it's not your particular club coach, but it might be a college coach in the area whose son might have been on your team and high school team, and they might make a phone call for you and say, wow, so and so isn't on the highest level club team or this or that, but he's got something special about it. There's this, you gotta get out there and see him play. And so lots of times it's credible references. Um, Other times it is just showing up on their campus at their ID clinic and putting yourself in the mix of other players that were on higher club teams and were being recruited earlier and just having a good performance. These other showcases that have players from all over, you might not be on that club team, but they are on the highest level club team. So you have an opportunity to prove that you're better than them. So um, credible references are really helpful. Going to these ID clinics where there are players that maybe have opportunities to play on different leagues or higher leagues is a great way to get the exposure.
Allison, what should parents expect their club coaches to do or not do? And is there an expectation for them?
Yeah, I think that, Asia, each club program is a little bit different. Some clubs are starting to have a full-time college coordinator, so they don't do any of the on the field or on the court or ice training. They specifically, their full-time job is to communicate and guide and assist through the recruiting process for the prospective student athletes. So there would be a very high, and with that might come an increase in your club costs.
Right. But it's a good selling point too. You might get more people. Yeah.
And what you need to what you need to ask is, what specifically do they offer? If I'm going into a club that has a full-time college coordinator, what is this recruiting coordinator offering me? Is he or she helping me with my college resume? Are they helping me devise a highlight tape, whether it's to figure out, what is it that the college coach is looking for on that highlight tape? Are they communicating directly to the coaches about my performance? Are they helping me write letters? Are they telling me what to do in the off season versus being in season? So there, you can certainly have a higher expectation if you have a full-time recruiting, coordinator in your club. I think a lot of club coaches, especially if they're part-time and they have a full-time job, have less time to assist in that process and might not have the connections, to assist in that process. And a lot of this is having the right connection. And certainly, for me, and I've been in the game, if I'm going to call one of, my colleagues, that I have a relationship, I can't support a player that I don't think is going to do well for them, and vice versa.
Yeah, it's because it's your reputation. Then that's the last time you can make a call.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And it wouldn't be good for either side. But there are a lot of club coaches that have previous college backgrounds, so they do have those connections. So I do think you can expect them to help in that process.
So listening to you, my parental anxiety is increasing, and I'm sure some people listening are like, "Oh my goodness! Like, how do I even make a highlight tape?" And oh my goodness, like we don't have the technology and so forth. So I want to go back to some practical, which again is I think the strength of your book, in addition to your expertise and your experience. But so. What are some do's and don'ts? That for somebody who aspires to play in college, maybe what are some mistakes that you've seen, and what are some things that people have done or you advise people to do that really helps them stand out?
Yeah, the first and foremost, Sam, I would say be really open-minded about the process. I think, everybody in 8th grade has some dream schools. Be ready for that to ebb and flow, and be ready for those schools to that list to change. And there's 333 just in Division I alone schools, and most kids know 10 schools that they want to go to. So
UNC.
Yeah, of course. And I think if you're open-minded to hear other suggestions and from your coaches and from and then that you might get contacted from, do a little bit more research about those schools. See if that could be a school you'd want to go visit. And so that would be first and foremost one of the things that I would say to make sure you're ready to be open-minded. I would say to the parents, assist the process, don't drive the process. Your kids are so talented and so driven. And Sam, you alluded to like getting a little anxiety over a highlight tape. I bet your kids could do it.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
I can't, but my daughter can. And your children probably can too. They know iMovie and sound effects, and highlights, and how to circle themselves. In their
It's true.
They can do this. So there are great companies out there, but I would say go first with your child. Have your child ask their coach, what do you think my best attributes as a player are? Specifically in my position, what functions should I be trying to highlight? What does a college coach want to see me be able to do in my position? Let them do that research, get that information, and then let them have a few game tapes that they know that they've had good games in, and they can cut tape and they can make it. It doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be perfect. It just needs to show these specific moments. And some of the best highlights I've seen are the ones that kids have done of themselves.
Allison, what about like in these club teams? So many times on the top level, there's so many talented players, and the coaches are writing ebbs and flows or of what and whatever. And you're at a tournament and you invite a coach and you don't start, or you only get a limited amount of playing time. Is that going to be an issue? Like how do coaches judge that?
Yeah, no, I don't think so. First and foremost, lots of times a coach goes to a section of the game, right? Especially if it's a tournament and there's, 40 courts, right? Or 40 fields. A coach will likely go see you for a half. So if it's the second half and you happen to start the second half, great. Or if you play the last 20 minutes or 25 minutes of that half, they'll be able to say, to figure out if you have some skills and some attributes that that they want to see more of, or that they might just say like, wow, I actually do think you can play for me right away. So they rarely watch a whole game in these bigger tournaments. So I don't think that, we have to get caught up in, was it a 90 minutes? Did they start? And lots of times coaches in these events aren't going to start their best players because they need it. They've got to keep it quality, through the entire game. So I don't think college coaches are looking at that specifically. The tough thing is if you don't get in at all in a half in the coach game,
Yeah.
that's nothing other than that's a total bummer,
Yeah.
But some positions, for instance, like a goalkeeper might know ahead of time if there's two goalies, they're going to get the second half, so they can write that in their letter that they're going to get it in the second half. That's very helpful. But I think you do the most the most of the time that you get. If it's 15, 20 minutes, you do the best you possibly can in that segment of time.
Mm-hmm.
So when should a middle school or high school, like at what grade or what age should a student athlete begin the process? And I'm talking very broadly, obviously,
Right.
but
Right. I think it's good for a ninth grader to understand the process. I don't think they have to full-fledged get into the process, but they need to know that eventually there's things that they're going to have to do. They're going to have to develop a player and academic resume. They should know what to include in that resume. They should know some of the rules and expectations. They should understand that there's this governing body for Division I and Division II called the Clearinghouse, and there's certain amount of classes they're going to have to take through high school. Preparation for SATs or ACTs, you can start kind of prepping a little bit, I think, as early as ninth grade. They should understand and do some research on different schools that they're thinking about at that time, and connect to social media. Why not? If there's 10 to 15 schools you're interested in, right now we can learn so much by following different athletic programs, college athletic programs online. You find out what they're doing for community service. Their team GPAs announced. You find out what they're doing for fun. There's training sessions that are, parts of training sessions that are online, parts of what they're doing in strength and conditioning that's online. Their dining services are online, on social media. So I would really encourage ninth graders to start getting into the athletic social media websites, and they know how to do that. They're probably already on it in eighth grade,
right.
to be honest.
Yeah.
But parents can do it too. It's good for you to know, what these programs look like. Coaches get interviewed all the time. Players get interviewed all the time. And you can look at that student athlete and be like, wow, I'd love my son or daughter to be in a community like that, in an environment like that. And that's important to me, that there's good people in this program. So that's one thing they can start doing now. And really, I don't think it starts really getting too in-depth until 10th grade, getting into these, or prior to 10th grade, getting into these ID clinics, getting into these showcases. That's when, if you're going to play at a pretty high level, that's when you really want to start thinking about it.
Yeah, Allison, all things equal, you have two players who are of equal skill. What are sort of the red flags or the things that you really look for beyond how they're playing?
I think there's still this myth that if I'm this great player, my grades don't matter. And especially at the more academic schools, that's not true. You want to help yourself out. You want to get the academic edge. So if there's two people that are playing at a pretty equal playing ability, separate yourself academically. Think about your on the field behavior or off the field behavior. How are you engaging in these tournaments with your coach at halftime? Are you still over by the water bottle, or are you fully engaged in what the halftime communication is? How did you warm up? Are you sort of over on the sideline still talking and not focused? Or are you really getting yourself prepared for the match? And post game, what do you do if you win or you lose? What's your behavior? We've all, as college coaches, seen the athlete, kick the water bottle one too many times and say, I'm not too sure about that. They're pretty good, but the other player is just as good, and they've got their arm around their player after a loss. So, those things, when you go to a college program, you become part of a family. and the coach becomes your parent. And there's a level of responsibility that that coach has, with you as a member of their team. And those things can be separated for sure.
Sam, I know you have another question, but before you get to your question, I just wanted to comment too. We had posted something a while back about a mom who's had a kid who's getting recruited, and the college coach said something about they're watching the parents too. So if you're screaming from the bleachers, they don't want that screaming behind their heads for 4 years either. So it's not just the behavior, right, of the athletes. It's also be aware of your own behavior as parents.
Yeah, that goes, and that's one of the things I said, let your athlete, really lead their recruiting process, and you assist it. There's been times that I've had an unofficial visit as sophomores, a player and a parent in my office, and I'd ask them, so tell me, what's your favorite position? I've noticed that you play, center mid and outside back. What do you prefer? And then the parent says, well, the preference is right back because he can make runs, she can make runs up the field, and she's really good at overlapping. And I just look like, I don't know about this, or what's your favorite subject? Well, she's got a really good science mind. She does like, there's an interest in the liberal arts. I know this is a liberal arts school, but she's really good in science. And you go on and be like, oh, how many phone calls am I going to get from this parent when I don't play them as much as they want them on the field, right? So, that's a very good point, Asia. That's a very good point.
So that was actually going to be my question.
I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. It's all good.
We're all on the same wave.
Yeah, we are. We're on the same page. Okay, so but I want to kind of elaborate a little bit on it. So you're coming to watch, a prospective college athlete at a showcase, and the parent is very vocal. The parent is yelling at the refs. The parent, and conversely, maybe their child in turn is yelling at teammates, pointing the finger, arguing with the referee as well. What does that do in your evaluation? I'm sure you've seen that. So, it could be, let's say they're a star, they're a dynamic, they're a great player. They shine on the field, but then you've got this very argumentative, vocal parent, and potentially the kid is as well. What do you do with that information?
Yeah, I think listen, we all can have a one-off, right? We can all have a bad day when we're outside of our character. So that's another reason why college coaches want to see, players that they're heavily recruiting multiple times, right? You can have a one-off on the field, you can have a one-off off the field. So is this a repetitive tendency? Is this something that behavior that continues with the parent and the child? And then often they're going to call the club coach. They're going to call the club coach and say, listen,
get their care.
So-and-so, but I've gone to 2 of your games now in this one particular tournament, and the mom was a nightmare. Or I felt, so-and-so, your player was just like not engaged during your halftime talk, and sort of, not engaged with the rest of her teammates. Tell me a little bit more about her. Tell me a little bit more how you feel she fits into the team. And club coaches have a reputation. They all want their players certainly to go play, in college, but they also have to make sure that they're telling, the truth, because if they want future players recruited, they can make or break that trust pretty early with one bad evaluation or one bad, statement about how the behavior of that player truly is. So coaches are going to do their homework. They're going to ask other club coaches that they know that have played against that athlete that they're recruiting to see what they've noticed. It's nobody wants a player to transfer. So they're going to do, college coaches are going to do their homework, and they're going to investigate, and they're going to ask questions from the club coach, from opponents. And then they're going to really, if they do make it to one of their ID clinics, have their own players check them out, and say, what do you think? When you guys were sitting down in the cafeteria during break, what was your take on her personality? So, it's, you're recruiting the whole person, in college athletics.
And their family.
And their family.
Well, Allison, I think we've probably just about done enough, taken enough of your time, but really, I think parents will gain so much value from your books and from listening to this chat. I mean, you're amazing. The Elusive Full Ride Scholarship, How to Coach Girls. You can see all my little notes. And
I like that. I was going to ask you which chapters were noted there, Mom.
A lot of them. There's so much valuable information, and really, it's just so great. I think everything we talked about today is super helpful, and I hope everyone got a lot out of it. And I want to put up your information. Allison, she does run Foley Athletic Advising, and so she does help other athletes get into college. You said you work with men and women, right? Girls and boys. Hello at folleyathleticadvising.com. Folleyathleticadvising.com is the website. That's the email. And at Foley Athletic Advising, you have Instagram and Facebook, right?
Yes, correct. Yep.
Is there anything you want to add or talk about or promote that you have coming up, or something we didn't touch on before we close it out?
No, this was great. You know, I love talking about this topic in, you know, college athletics, high school sport, middle school sport. I just love it. I'm passionate about it. I just want to keep kids playing. And Asia and Sam, thanks so much for including me today.
Thank you
Thanks
so
for being
much.
here.
All right, Allison, we'll talk to you again soon, I'm sure.
Sounds great. Thank you, guys. Take care.
Bye, guys.